This book asked the burning question, what if garden gnomes were alive? The original cover is simple yet effective, full of lawn ornament staples, especially the pink flamingos. Apparently the cover was supposed to have the gnome on the left picking his nose, but the higher-up said that was too far. Insane to me, but oh well. The 2000s reprint has this striking green cover with red text, which I actually love. The taglines are, "Keep off their grass," and "Someone's been stalking in my garden." While I did just say 2 books ago we no longer have UK covers, I should at least mention that the UK cover renames this book as Revenge of the Garden Gnomes. Not sure if anybody outside the US actually calls their yard a lawn. Lastly is the classic cover, where I can't possibly understand how your ass could mistake these for garden gnomes. The bonus features include gnome names, popular fictional gnomes, small but deadly animals, creepy recipes, and the splat stats. The gnomes are quite strong. It's a hot, sticky, and wet summer, and our main character today is Joe Barton, battling his older sister Mindy in a match of ping pong. He's a little shrimp, but he says he can always kick Mindy's ass. Then we get a few paragraphs of him bad-mouthing Mindy for having some OCD behavior like organizing her books alphabetically and her clothes by color and eating her food in a certain order or she goes crazy. So as a kid, Joe thinks she's a weirdo, but he's unorganized, cool, and funny. They spend time arguing with each other while playing ping pong, until they talk about their pet dog Buster. He's a Rottweiler who is actually a gentle giant, but he has a habit of digging up and eating their neighbor's veggies, Mr. McCall. Mr. McCall and Dad are gardening rivals, the 2 best gardeners in town, and they always fight for the annual garden show's medal for best crops, I guess. Joe loudly declares that him and Dad will win again this year, but then there are footsteps. "McCall!" The floor shakes. McCall yells out to give him a paddle. Joe explains this isn't actually Mr. McCall, but his son, Moose. That's not his legal name, but everyone calls him that. In a twist, the biggest kid in the book is not our main character's bully, but Moose is actually his bestie. He's just as gross as the typical bully character though, so not much really changes. He's actually pretty insane, flattening ping pong balls and jumping on the table until it nearly breaks, calling himself Super Moose. Then he grabs Joe and puts him in a submission hold. Joe begs for his life, and when Moose lets go, Mindy goes to check on him. He whispers out, "You're a sucker!" It was all just a trick to make Mindy think he was getting murdered. After that business, Mindy sees Buster's back in the garden next door, so everyone runs over to stop him from eating before Mr. McCall murders the poor dog. They catch Buster digging towards Mr. McCall's fresh new melons, and it's only a few minutes till McCall comes out to water the plants, but Buster won't stop digging, and he's too big for Joe to pick him up. Luckily, Joe has a dog whistle on him, but it's too late. Just as Buster starts moving, "Here he comes!" Joe tries to make some bad excuses about Buster, but Mindy asks for forgiveness, and Mr. McCall obliges. While that saves Buster from being sent to the pound, you won't hear Joe giving Mindy any credit. Back at their house, they find Dad in the garden looking a lot more concerned than usual. He says, "Kids, I have something terrible to tell you. I found a fruit fly on the tomatoes." The kids think this is an over-exaggeration, but Dad knows it could ruin the entire crop. So he has them all grab a can of the fresh new Bug Begone spray in the garage and gas the ever-living hell out of these tomatoes. Luckily, the fly in question is killed in the process, and Dad wants to celebrate by going to Lawn Lovely, the store only 2 blocks away where Dad buys a ton of ornaments. They have flamingos, an angel, skunks, a fountain with swans, a plastic deer, a seal with a beach ball. He's got everything. He even dresses them up for the holidays. The kids think they're all goofy and totally uncool, but they have to go to the store anyway. And so, Joe gives us a classic foreshadowing sentence to say they had no idea the most horrifying adventure of their lives was about to start. The family walks there against Mindy's protests, and Lawn Lovely sticks out like a sore thumb, being 3 stories tall and painted entirely pink. Dad looks around until he locks in on 2 gnomes, chubby with red eyes and, well, typical gnome attire. Mindy says they look evil, but Dad decides on his own that he's getting them. Joe takes a closer look, admitting to himself they are pretty ugly. And kinda creepy too. But then he screams out, "The gnome just moved! It won't let me go!" Out of concern, Mindy sprints over to help, but it's another one of the usual jokes these kids play. Dad comes back out and says before they leave they should give these gnomes some names. He'll call the happy one Hap, and the one with the chipped tooth Chip. The gnomes are really heavy, and the kids have to deal with neighborhood kids laughing at them on the walk back. Dad sets them both up on opposite sides of the deer, and Moose comes over to take a look. Him and Joe act like idiots pretending to fight the gnomes, but then Mindy notices yet again Buster is next door. McCall bursts out the door before any excuses can be made, but luckily Dad pops out at the same time. This leads to some friendly banter between gardening rivals, so the situation is diffused. Now, Buster's licking Hap's face as he seems to have pushed the gnome to the ground. Joe blows his whistle, but when he picks the gnome up, his face is totally different. The smile changes to one of pure terror. Joe tries to tell everyone, but when they come over, Hap's back to normal. In other news, Buster has one more chance or he'll be getting tied up. The next day, Joe gets up eager to mow the grass. He made a deal with Dad, if he mows every week of the summer, he'll get a new bike. As soon as he gets outside, though, McCall yells at him to come over, saying that Buster needs tied up. One of his precious new melons is completely ruined. Joe says Buster doesn't even like melons, but the dog sure looks guilty, so Dad says he's going to have to tie him up. Painters are coming today too, so having him tied up is a win-win. Moose comes over after the mowing and decides to play ring toss with Joe, using the gnome's hats as targets. When the game's over, Joe runs over to collect the rings, but what's that on the gnome's mouth? A melon seed? How did that get there? At night, Joe has a nightmare about melons and is woken up by Buster howling outside. He hears noises in the house, and when he gets downstairs, he gets grabbed from behind. It's Mindy, catching Joe on his way to calm down Buster. He notices something rustling in the grass and assumes it must be raccoons. So in the morning, he'll tell Dad raccoons have been eating McCall's melons. He talks to Buster and everything's a-okay, except not. Everybody heads outside at 6:30 in the morning as McCall yells so loud it wakes everybody. It's something too crazy for a raccoon to do. Smiley faces, drawn on each melon in marker. Mindy clearly blames Joe because she knew he went outside last night. There's no way he can explain how someone else could be guilty. Now he's grounded for 2 weeks, and McCall somehow thinks it's impossible to remove the marker. Joe reads his comic books, plays with toys, rearranges the entirety of Mindy's closet, but now he's bored, and it's not even noon. He has a real aversion to paint fumes, so Mom relents and lets him at least take Buster for a walk. When they return, Buster takes turns sniffing everything, including the gnomes. The same gnomes who have black paint on their fingers? He decides to tell somebody, because that always works. Buster also decides to lick the gnomes again, and their expressions change to look like they're screaming. He gets Mom to come downstairs, but they're back to grinning, and she says the paint is just dirt. She doesn't punish him anymore, at least, just saying the joke isn't funny. Not funny at all. Not funny. Huh? The gnomes said that! At dinner, Joe decides against his better judgment he needs to tell them about what he heard, and as you'd expect, who would believe him saying gnomes are alive and speaking? After, Dad suggests going to water those prized tomatoes again, but him and Joe find the entire patch is completely destroyed. Joe has to practically drag Dad to go check on the gnomes, and what they find is so surprising. Nothing. The gnomes are practically spotless. Dad gets so pissed, we get the, "I never want to hear about the plot ever again or you're in big trouble." It's not just that, though. Dad gets so pissed he calls out McCall and splatters the tomatoes on his white shirt, accusing him of sabotaging his plants. They almost get into a fight, and McCall blames Joe for everything. At night, Joe can't sleep. He looks outside at a strangely foggy night, seeing every lawn ornament laid out as it should be, except the gnomes. Joe sprints over and wakes up Mom and Dad to tell them, let me cut to the chase, they don't give a fuck. So he has to hope Mindy will at least believe him. No, she doesn't. So Joe sprints outside alone, trudging through deep fog until he gets caught by a snake. Actually, a hose. He hears footsteps in the darkness but can't see anything. Then something grabs him from behind, laughs, and throws him to the ground. He looks up to see Moose. He also heard weird sounds, so he came outside, managed to see Joe, and decides to mess with him. Joe explains how the gnomes are gone, but Moose thinks he hid them as a joke and pins him to the ground yelling, asking where they are. Both houses' lights come on, so Joe tells Moose to be quiet, and maybe they won't find him. That actually works due to the fog. Except then it doesn't, because both dads shine some flashlights on them and yell at them. Moose runs home, and Joe begs Dad to believe him about the gnomes, so Dad finally gives him the benefit of the doubt, and... Hey, you're right, son, they are gone. The deer, too. Huh? Then the fog shifts, and never mind, the deer's here, and the gnomes, too. Haha, son, the fog sure can do some funny things with your vision. So nobody believes him, the tomatoes are destroyed, and Moose is banned from ever seeing Joe again. What else could possibly go wrong, he says. So the next morning, it goes wrong. White paint all over McCall's red Jeep. Joe goes out to ask Moose about the situation. Apparently, this was the one day McCall had his Jeep out of the garage because his wife has been cleaning the place out. That sucks. Anyway, McCall wants whoever was responsible thrown in jail, and Joe knows they'll probably blame him or Moose because they were the only ones outside last night. Joe looks down and sees a small paint trail leading all the way to the gnomes. Joe lays out the evidence and decides they'll both watch outside to catch the gnomes in the act. With the threat of punishment from the police, Moose agrees. At midnight, the two watch behind some bushes as a raccoon runs through. 2 hours later, they are about to give up when the gnomes actually start to stretch. Moose calls it out too loud, and they've been caught. The gnomes seem to slowly come out of a stone-like slumber, and instead of running away, they actually start running towards the boys, but then past them. They didn't actually get caught, but they went around the house. They slowly turn around to follow, and Moose nearly chickens out, but Joe convinces him to stay. They find the gnomes prying open cans of black paint and sloshing it on the side of the freshly white house. Moose says, "Why don't we just tackle these little assholes?" "Sounds good to me." The plan goes horribly. Moose trips over Buster's rope that tied him to the tree, and that wakes the dog up. The gnomes spin around to attack. The boys start running, all while the gnomes give chase and giggle at them. The kids yell for help, but no one seems to come. Somehow they are so bad at running, and are about to pass out when Mindy comes to the door. Joe can't warn her in time before the gnomes grab her and drag her to the street. The gnomes have some unnatural strength, letting them pin Mindy's arms and carry her away, so the boys toughen up and start to chase. They run past a few more houses, giggling all the while, then set Mindy down. Immediately they code switch right to being serious, saying they mean no harm and just wanted attention. They can't help the damage they cause, because they're actually mischief elves. Their life's purpose is to cause mischief. So let me wow you with a tale of elven exposition. These gnomes/elves, whatever, want their freedom. They used to do every trope known to man. They guarded the mines, they protected the trees. They only did some innocent mischief, but then, mines were closed, forests deforested, and they were trafficked, forced to be slaves as lawn ornaments in America specifically. They have some sort of trance ability that turns off at night so they can do their species-forced mischief. But what they really want is a new forest to be able to live freely. What they need is the kids' help to free them, and their 6 other friends who are locked in the basement of that ornament store. They can get in the basement window, but need help getting back out through the door. They can't reach the knob. What do we do? After enough begging, the kids agree to help, but they need to do it now. When they walk to the store, Joe wonders if the other lawn ornaments like flamingos are alive too, but Hap says no. Well, that's convenient. The gnomes nudge the kids towards the window, and they all slide into the dark basement. Didn't he say the door was locked? I thought the whole point would be one kid would stand on the opposite side of the door to unlock it. Why would it be locked from the inside? Well, everyone's here now and the lights flash on, but there aren't 6 gnomes here, more like 600. Hap and Chip begin clapping, announcing to every other gnome they brought the young humans. It'll be so much fun! They all laugh, saying the kids should have known the mischief gnomes were just making up some fake-ass sob story. The crowd of gnomes try to think of ways to abuse the kids for fun. Tickle them, dribble them on the walls, fold them into pieces. Joe decides at that moment to yell. He gets all the gnomes' attention and says if they don't let him go, he'll yell to wake up the owner and she'll do something, I don't know. The gnomes burst out laughing. They all know she's hard of hearing. Well, damn, it's all over. The crowd keeps chanting, and the new idea of tug-of-war using the kids seems pretty appealing. Out of nowhere, a familiar noise draws near. A bark. Buster! Joe remembers how every time Buster licked the gnomes, they got scared shitless, so maybe the gnomes have a fear of dogs? Joe yells out to the window, convincing Buster to come towards him. He tries to get him to jump into the room, but he walks away. Aha, the most obvious idea. Joe will use the dog whistle to bring the dog back. The gnomes go silent as soon as they see it and dive towards him. They knock the whistle out of his hands and it slides across the floor. The gnomes make it there faster, but Moose nearly crushes one with his massive frame. The whistle flies over right to Joe and he picks it up. Tons of gnomes start to pile on him and the whistle is lost again. A few moments later, it's in the hands of Hap, who's about to crush it. In a moment of desperation, Joe dives forward and grabs it off the floor, barely dodging Hap's foot. Then he blows. He blows again and the room goes quiet, but Buster's nowhere to be found. When the kids turn around, they notice all the gnomes are completely frozen, put back in their trance state. It seems the whole time the dog whistle was the problem, not the dog. Time to go home, so the kids use the frozen bodies of Hap and Chip to give them the boost they need to reach the window. The next evening, the 2 gnomes are still gone, so Dad's a little bummed his prize gnomes were stolen. But hey, he's got a new surprise, a ginormous plaster gorilla, 8 feet tall with a purple chest. It's absolutely ugly as hell, and somehow Dad thought this was a good idea. Anything's better than the lawn gnomes, though, and that's when the gorilla gives Joe a wink. Hey, look, maybe the gorilla's a good guy? The real concern's the gnomes. We know earlier in the story the whistle doesn't freeze them forever, so the odds of them getting out is pretty high. Honestly, what's stopping them from just using each other as a step stool to get out of the window? There's hundreds of them in that basement. Doesn't really make any sense. The Goosebumps Wiki also mentions Stein didn't like the writing of this book, and I can see why. Moose could have been a nice inversion, but he's still pretty much an annoying bully, just one that's friends with our protagonist. The idea of the gnomes is interesting, and the Mischief Elf backstory could have actually been cool, if that wasn't completely made up and resolved in a single chapter. I'm just gonna hold out hope that this gorilla's a cool guy, so let's see what the episode is cooking. The episode immediately starts with Joe and Mindy having an aggressive game of catch, which ends up with their ball in the neighbor's yard. In a completely different plot to the book, McCall is like a drill sergeant that doesn't let anybody in his yard.
Now it's mine.
Dad comes home with the gnomes by himself, in a truck, not walking. Dad says they might win the garden competition with the gnomes, so now the competition is less about crops and more about decoration. Mindy also likes the idea of dressing the gnomes up. Well, this episode's already completely different so far. McCall comes over to talk shit about the gnomes and gas up his flowers and melons. He also makes it clear if anything happens to his lawn, he will be targeting Joe. We get a POV shot of one of the gnomes running over and destroying one of the melons too, which is nice. Not just that, but Joe says he didn't do it, and Dad's pretty nice about it, and he's immediately suspicious of these gnomes. We get the ring toss, just like the book. Poor Moose has been erased from existence. Wait, black paint and melon seeds? We get to watch the gnomes come to life, and what the hell is that? Joe sneaks around at night, and this might be the noisiest yard on Earth. He finds the gnomes going apeshit and almost gets attacked, but then McCall's security system goes off, and these enormous lights cause the gnomes to freeze, almost like the Pillar Men. Either they're faking it, or this is just an issue with switching between actors and props. So now Joe is forced to be McCall's slave and replant all of his stuff. And at night, he's smart enough to actually have a video camera to record. But he has no tape. Great. So like the book, he tries to wake Dad, and that doesn't work. Then he tries to wake Mindy, and that does work. The gnomes catch them, and there are more than 2 now. 4 of them surround the kids, doing what you'd expect. They don't even try a sob story either. They're just like, bitch, we're gnomes. Don't you know we do mischief? Hap and Chip fight, drop this flashlight the kids have, reminding Joe and Mindy the light freezes them. They get backed right into McCall's yard, meaning they really expected us to not pay attention as kids, or the gnomes are this stupid enough to not remember this would happen. Except the gnome wakes up and kills McCall. These stereotypically British-looking judges come to announce they didn't win because of some horrific new ornament.
That hideous lawn ornament. That.
Well, I would have to say this episode does a better job at ending the plot than the book. Lights freezing them makes a lot of sense to me, hence why they only go out at night. And they never actually get defeated, they just now have the ability to turn people into lawn ornaments. Now that is scary. But are you checking your yard every night to see if your ornaments are moving? Do you even have any ornaments out there? Keep an eye out, because in 2 weeks it'll be a shocker on Shock Street.